It still has a delay, but we'll get started anyway.
Okay, sounds good. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Chain Breakers. My name is Antoinette Weaver, and this is my partner.
Emma Cole Conquell.
And we're going to discuss a book that we've been reading and that we want to share with you guys called The Unapologetic Guide to Black Mental Health. And so Emma is going to get us started.
All right, first of all, welcome everybody. We are doing a book review on the Unapologetic Guide to Black Mental Health, and it's a book by Dr. Rita Walker. I was introduced this book about a year ago, and honestly, just reading it, it really did change my life, not only personally, but also professionally. I actually did a review for the social work team that I'm a part of, and just personally, when I read the book, I saw everything in it. I saw myself in it. I saw my family in it. I saw my community in it, the kids that I work with at my school. And it was just necessary to me that I could not keep everything that I read in the book or everything that I learned in the book. I just couldn't keep it to myself because it just had so much information and so much valuable information, especially, in the Black community. And that's, one of the main populations that I work with. That's the population that I go to church with, and that's the community that I'm a part of. And it was just life changing. It actually started me on my journey, with mental health, and even seeking out a counselor and starting going to therapy myself. And so I shared it with my team. I shared it with the NAACP in Missouri City. I shared it with my family, with my friends across the country. And it's something that we wanted to continue to do. So as we started this journey of Chain Breakers, I felt that, especially since we started in February, that this would be a perfect launching point for what we're trying to do in breaking the chains around mental health. And so I hope you guys, this is a book I believe should be in everybody's house, especially in the Black community. I think it's something you guys should read and discuss as a family, in all generations, older generations, whatever generation, your kids, and something that it should be a conversation that is continued, because we go through different things at different points in life. And so, like I said, I hope you guys enjoy the book. I hope you guys go out and buy the book, purchase the book, and also just discuss the book and share it with, the circles that you are involved.
Yes, I totally agree, Emika. When I heard you present to the social workers and to the mental health counselor team, I was just so greatly impacted by your presentation. I just recently lost Cameron to a completed suicide, and I was working diligently to understand why, what was the reasons why. And as I heard you present, I understood more, I guess more completely the struggle that he was facing as a Black man in America and dealing with mental health. And so it was truly a blessing to me at that time to hear you present. And so, I had been gifted the book a few weeks prior, but I hadn't even opened it until I heard your presentation. And so when we decided to launch Chain Breakers, I agreed that this should be the first thing that we discuss because it has been so impactful. And I think everyone will benefit from it. And it can help open the discussion about mental health and help, us all see how it impacts each other, because I only have my own perspective. I only have a perspective of a woman. And so to have a male perspective has been very enlightening.
Yeah, and I think even when you talked to me after the presentation, it's touching, and just knowing that even when I did the presentation, I didn't know how it would be received. Knowing that I was doing it to a team, a mixed team of various backgrounds, it was something that I even hesitated with myself. Should I do this presentation? It was like, I can't not do this presentation. I don't care if there are already repercussions. I don't care if anybody does have anything negative to say. It's something that I'm not going to sit quiet on. And so I'm glad that we're continuing the conversation. And so I guess let's just get into it.
Okay, sounds good.
So I don't know if anyone on the line has read the book or seen the book, but basically Dr. Rita Walker is a PhD. She works here locally at the University of Houston in the psychology department. And one of her main reasons for even putting this book out is because she's seen the increase, in suicide in the Black community. That was one of her main reasons. But also, more recently, when we just look at COVID, and we know that we're human beings and we're social beings, and we know that there has been an uptake in mental health concerns, especially in the last 2 years around COVID. And so one of the things that she talked about is just some of the assumptions and some of the beliefs that we have in the Black community around mental health. And that was one of the things that I saw and that I noticed when I talk to parents at the schools I work at, when I talk to people just in my circle. And it's like one of the things that she talked about is just how we have to start to break down those assumptions. The assumption that Black people don't go to counseling or don't go to therapy, the assumption that Black people don't commit suicide. Sometimes we wear our strength and the things that we've endured as a badge of honor, and we just assume that because we've had this journey that we can get through anything, and we don't have to have therapy. That sometimes we might think therapy or counseling is for the weak, and we know that that's not the truth. And so we have to start to break down these stereotypes. So that's one of the things that she touches on at the beginning of the book, is just talking about how we have to start to break those things down. She talks about just the layers of secrecy that we have. I know a lot of times we've all heard the saying, what happens in this house stays in this house. And I think at the beginning of that, the foundation of that might have been just so we don't have other people in our business. I know in early times of, you've got government assistance and all of that. Sometimes when you were getting assistance, you couldn't have a male in the house. And, I remember even my cousin, he was like, oh, I know they're coming to my house, but I have to go move everything into the garage. And it's like, so sometimes the things that happen in the house were part of our protection. But in this day and age, a lot of things that have happened in the house that we haven't spoken about for generations are actually hindering us and hindering our growth. And personally, I believe that that is, one of our generational curses. Is that things that have happened to our parents, things that happened to our grandparents, we never talk about, we never discuss it. I've had a lot of friends. If we know statistically, I think 1 out of 5 females has been a victim of some sort of sexual abuse or sexual violence. And I know personally, females that have been victims of violence, and it's like, my mom said she got through it and she's okay. So, don't tell anybody, or just, it'll be okay. And I think, that's one of the things that kind of helped me want to speak more about it too, is that we have to start speaking about what's going on in our houses. We can't just continue to brush things underneath the rug and think that we're going to be okay, because we are teaching generation after generation just not to speak out and not to go seek help. And that's the thing, when we hold it to ourselves, it limits us in going out seeking the help that we need, and especially in our community. And that's one of the main things about her book too, is that she just speaks about we have to start to break down these assumptions.
Yeah, you touched on a lot of great points, especially about the sexual abuse endured in our community. It's almost become a norm. It's like it happens, but we don't speak on it, and that opens the door for it to continue to happen, because when the victimizer has the space to victimize, and no one is speaking up, or no one is and they're not suffering any consequences, then there's it provides more opportunity to do it. And there have been so many women, in my life who have experienced abuse who never speak on it. They go on with life and pretend that it hasn't happened. And then, later we find out that it's happened to our aunts, it's happened to our mothers. And so, if we can't even talk to those women who are right there in our circle, or if we do open up to them and tell them, and we're just told to, just put it behind us, then how do we ever really move forward? How do we ever stop it from happening? How do we ever really truly heal from it? And so I think, unfortunately, that, the sexual abuse, as well as many other issues within our community, speaking on things such as depression and anxiety, something that has happened throughout families time and time again, but no one spoke on it because they didn't want to seem weak. In our community, strength is a badge of honor. And I've spoken on that since I've lost Cameron, where, I don't like to be told that I'm strong, because, it feels like a deficit now, because if I'm strong and I can handle these things, then they will continue to happen. And so I think also, it also dismisses the emotions behind it. It teaches us not to feel. It teaches us not to really process things because we want to have this facade that we keep on for, for everyone else around us. So I just can't, like I said, I just feel so blessed that I heard that presentation for you because it opened up so many doors. I grew up with the same mentality of, family secrets stay within the family. You don't want to embarrass the household. But until we start speaking about what we feel, until we start speaking about our experiences, we can't make change happen. And so I think this is definitely the catalyst to open up those dialogues and to make speaking up a norm, to make discussing what we're going through a norm. So I'm looking forward to, what this platform will present for us and for our viewers.
And I agree with that completely, especially, saying that you feel like you have to be strong. I know a lot of times we talk about a strong Black woman, right? Or we have certain stereotypes that a man is supposed to be, and we're going to have some discussions, in the future where we just talk about, a man is supposed to be, society tells us men are supposed to be strong. Even one of the examples I've used a lot of times is when we have a baby, we have a little baby boy, and if he falls, we pick him up, we brush him off, and we tell him it's going to be okay, continue to play. If we have a little girl who cries and falls, it's like we're going to hold her for the next 30 minutes. We're going to ask her 20 times if she's okay, and then we're going to watch her even more closely to make sure that it happens again. And so a lot of these, the strength and a lot of those things, this starts at a young age. And then if that's how we're being raised, it's going to continue, whether it's in early elementary, whether it's in high school with our teenagers, or even, myself as a grown man. It's like, it's hard to open up, or it's hard to say, no, I'm not feeling up to it today, or I'm feeling weak today, or I don't have it all together, because for so long we've been taught that's not how you're supposed to act. Society doesn't accept that, especially from a male, or especially if society, saying it's a strong, Black female, you can do it. You're supposed to be able to get through this. And the truth is, it's days we can't get through it. And it's days, especially, we can't get through it alone. Whether that's as a male or a strong Black female, whatever it is, you can't do it alone. And this discussion and this book is definitely opened up the doors. It's definitely made me not only more vulnerable, but just willing to share more of what's going on, even personally. And so I think we need more transparent. But I know that that's part of the purpose and part of the reason that we're, even this discussion.
Oh yeah, most definitely. That really resonates with me. Being the mother of a boy and a girl, and even just being in opposition sometimes with their father, with my son. How I would treat him, and he's like, "You're babying him. You're gonna make him weak." And I had, aversion to that, even though I wasn't trained back then as a therapist. I knew that he also needed love. He also needed to be comforted, and if a child falls and hurts themselves, for us to tell them, "Oh, you're a boy, go brush it off," then that you're basically essentially telling them that pain is weakness. And so, and not only that, but not allowing them to feel what they feel. And then, as they get older, we're looking for them to be sensitive. We're looking for them to be nurturers and learn how to parent their children. But we've instilled from them from the day that they were born that that you're tough and you're hard, and that represents man. It represents them being a man. So that was even, that was confusing to me back then, before I even had the opportunity to study and to become more educationally, aware. But, sometimes we still don't, even though it doesn't feel right, we still go ahead and follow those things because they're the norm within our culture. And so we just continue those generational things. And, and unfortunately, our children suffer from it.
Yeah. And I think one of the things too, when we just get back to, what the book is talking about, and some of the, some of the topics, one of the topics and the main reasons was around suicide. And so I want to just touch on that a little bit. Just that suicide, like, Dr. Rita Walker saying that in our community, a lot of times we think suicide is a white issue where it doesn't happen. And one of the topics that she talked about is, suicide by another name. It was three main things that she kind of talked about, and that also goes to the, it touches on the part of being strong, or especially in the Black community, especially in the Black male community, and especially with that age group of, 18 to 24. One of the things that she talked about in Suicide Was Another Name is just almost welcoming violence, into our lives. There was three main things that she talked about. One was like suicide, by medical neglect. One was suicide by just doing self-medicating. One was, around violence. When we look at the age group, especially 18 to 24, we know one of the main reasons for death is around violence. I work in a high school, and a lot of times in the high school, you talk, and I work in the middle school too. So a lot of times in middle school, you talk to these boys, and it's like, oh, I want to be this in the NBA. I want to be this in the NFL. I want to do this. I want to, and then you go see them in high school, and it's kind of like they've lost hope. And one of the things that I've noticed, and one of the things that I've seen is a lot of times, hope is having something for the future, right? Having a vision, having a goal, and seeing that you're able to get to it. And it's like a lot of times when they lose hope, they start to take matters into their own hands. And so when we look at violence, how many times I talk to students all the time, that's like, they don't care about the violence that they're involved in. It's almost like they welcome the fights. In this day and age, there's been more fights this year in school than there's been in probably 8 years combined. And it's a badge of honor, but so much we see a lot of times in our community, we see how quickly that leads to death, right? If anyone knows Dr. Canada, back in the day, he had one of his first books that he ever wrote was called Fist, Stick, Knife, Gun. And what it talks about is just the evolution of violence. It's like at first you would fight. Okay, you fight, it's over with, we keep moving. Now you bring weapons, you have a stick, you have a knife. But in this day and age, it's so much gunplay, and it's so many kids that I see that I work with daily, because they've lost hope. They put themselves in situations that they can lose their life so easily, and they don't even see it. And so what she talks about is that's suicide by another name, because they're not going to say that they're suicidal, but they also don't have any hope or any goals of making it to see 24 or 25. A lot of times in our music, even that we listen to, it's like, Tupac or whoever it is, it's like, oh, I'm happy just that I even made it to 21 or to 24, because a lot of times in certain communities, and especially in our community, especially in inner city communities, a lot of young men don't make it to that age. Or if we look at the incarceration rate, all of those things, and it's kind of like we put ourselves in environments and situations that violence can end our life, and we're not going to say that we're suicidal. So that's something that I think we also have to touch on, along with the other two, which is, medical neglect, and then also self-medicating. I don't know if you want to touch on one of those, and I can touch on the other one.
Okay, I think the one that really resonated with me is the medical neglect, because diabetes and hypertension run rampant within my family and within just my social network in general. And so, you go to the doctor, if you go to the doctor, because that's a huge factor. A lot of people, I don't go to the doctor, they can't tell me something's wrong, and so I don't have to deal with it. And so many people are walking around with diseases that are issues that are treatable, but they won't even go to the doctor to get diagnosed. And then also many times once they are treated, let's say the doctor says you have diabetes, and, but you can manage that. You can, change your diet, you can exercise, you can reduce your stress and things of that nature, but yet we don't want to give up the foods. We still want to continue to eat the unhealthy foods. We make excuses and say we don't have time to work out. But if our lives and our body and our health were priorities, we would make that time, because we make time for the things that are a priority for us. And so, when I read that in the book, it made me wonder. It's like, is she saying it's a conscious attempt to, to neglect your health and to ultimately result in suicide? And then the more I processed it, I don't think that is so. It's not necessarily a choice that you're making to say that I want to die, but it is a choice that you can make in the front end and say, I can do these things to prolong my life. But so I guess it really doesn't matter, because subsequently the end result is you are losing your life because you're choosing not to work out, or you're choosing not to eat right, or even with medications. I hear so many people speak on the medications for those disorders. I don't want to do this because it makes me feel this way, or because of these side effects. And in many cases, that's understandable, because there are a lot of medications that you take, and the side effects are worse than what you're experiencing at first. But are you changing your diet, or you working out so that you don't need the medications? So I think, like I said, that I think that really resonated me, because I can pinpoint, many people of many different ages in my circles that are in that position. They know very well that a disorder that they have could result in ending their lives, but they don't make the conscious effort to make, the improvements that's necessary.
Yeah, and I'll touch on that just a tad bit, because I was actually I was a social worker at a dialysis clinic for 2 years, and I had to do suicide assessments or depression assessments, with the patients, and especially, amongst it was mostly Black and Latino patients. And when I would do their depression assessments, of course, they wouldn't sit here and answer, "Yes, I'm depressed," right? Or,
Mm-hmm.
"Yes, I don't." One of the questions was, "Have you ever wanted to hurt yourself?" and all of that. But like you said, okay, if you know that you have to go to dialysis 3 times a week and you're only coming 1 time a week, you might not sit here and say, "Yes, I want to die," or "Yes, I want to, hurt myself or kill myself," but you're also not doing everything that you need to live, you know?
Right.
And so that was one of the things that it really touched me when I read it too, because I saw so many of my patients, going through it. It's like, they're not going to sit here and say that, but they also know, okay, if I'm coming once a week, that's only 4 times a month. 9 times out of 10, I'm lessening the length of my life. And they were in
Right.
pain. And the thing is, even when they were in pain, this isn't the life that they had for themselves. This isn't, going to sit in dialysis for 4 or 5 hours a day, go home. They can't eat what they want to. They can't drink what they want to. It's patients as young as, 20 something. Like, I can't go out to the bar with my friends because I can't drink.
Mm-hmm.
Especially being here in Texas, it's like I can only drink 36 ounces a day. How do I do that? And it's
Right.
105 degrees in August, so that was, one of the things that I noticed as well when I read that, that part of her book. And then the last one was just even, self-medicating. And this is one that I see daily. I do different groups at my high school, and I talk to the kids, and I know that they smoke, right? And they're open with it. It's like, it's loud sometimes when they walk through the door, like, they are, and it's just like, even at a young age, you might say, "Yes, it's fun," or "Yes, we're just doing it." But I also know they're not being successful in the classroom. I also know, I had a group of about 8 boys, and I asked them how many of them had somebody in their family that had died of violence. All 8 raised their hand. I said, how many of them had someone in their family that was incarcerated? I think 6 out of the 8 raised their hand. And so I also know, one of the things that we talk about, whether it's alcoholism, whether it's smoking weed, whatever it is, that a lot of times, we are self-medicating, in our community. And so we're not going to say, "Yes, I want to die," but we're also doing things. Like I said, all 3 of those things is going to lessen our life, quicker. And so that part of the book really touched me as well, especially working. Some of my schools are Title I schools, mostly Black, Black and Hispanic, and then just being in the environment and even seeing, how I was in high school, seeing how some of my friends are. It's like, you still see those things, even grown people. It's like, "Oh, I can't wait to get home. I'm gonna go have a drink." And it's like, yeah, you might have a glass of wine to wind down, but I also know people I can't wait to get home and hit this blunt. And it's like, that's the first thing, like, you're thinking about that all day, and that's the first thing you do when you get home. There's underlying issues to that, and that's what we have to really, dive into. And that was one thing when I read this book. It's like, I had to take a look in the mirror and really say, you know what, it's different things that I want in my life, and I have to start taking those steps to be healthy. And not only that, if I want to be doing different speaking engagements, talking about it, I also have to start to participate in this system. And so one of the things that I did last year is I did, seek out counseling. I do have a therapist that I go to regularly. And at
Mm-hmm.
first, even being a social worker is kind of like, I shied away from even wanting to discuss it, or even, it took me 3 months to even really take the steps to go find one. But it's like, I can't keep putting this off, you know. And I think that's something that we have to start to talk about too, is it's okay not to be okay. You know, you're a counselor, I'm a social worker. It's like counselors and social workers, we take on a lot of other people's stuff. So we have to have someone that we talk to. We have to have someone that we can, and a lot of times, especially in our jobs, you have a full-time job, you probably have an employee assistance program that you can get the counseling for free. And we'll talk about that maybe a little later at the end of this.
Yeah, definitely. I think, that was similar to my own story. I've been in and out of therapy most of my adult life for various reasons. But it really resonated with me, I guess, in my maybe within 10 years or so in my marriage, of all of the things that I have just let just build up throughout, and you dismiss them because you're, like you said before, oh, this is common, this is just a part of life. You deal with it, you pray about it, and and you don't get the help. But at some point you have to face, depression is real. I started having anxiety attacks where I didn't know what was happening. I thought literally, at 20 something, I was having a heart attack, but it was, my body's way of telling me you need to face, what these issues that you're dealing with. And a part of that is just communication. Communicating our hurts, facing them, being able to talk to someone. And I think that's the biggest thing. Even, now being a trained therapist, even going back into therapy, once I lost Cameron, it was still kind of like, okay, now I have to face my truth. I have to really open up and tell my complete story. And that, that's scary to be that open and that vulnerable with someone. But it's definitely a necessary step. And I, even with that, being in therapy, twice a month, and every month I'm like, okay, I'm ready now. I got this under control. I can tell them this is the last session. And then I go in there and I start processing things and I realize this is not the last session. And so we have to be willing to be open to that journey and to get that help. And so, I think that's the most important thing that we can share tonight is, just be open, just be willing to go make that appointment. And also, if you're schedule with someone and that person isn't working for you, you don't feel like you're growing, then you have options to not give up on therapy, but maybe to find another therapist.
Yeah, and that's the thing Dr. Walker talked about a lot about in her book. The first thing you touched on is, depression. And one of the things, anybody watched the videos that I did earlier last week, is, a lot of times when we look at depression, she talked about the research. When we look at, if anyone knows, the DSM-4, the DSM-5 is the book that therapists and counselors and psychologists, that's what they use to diagnose people with mental health, right? And so when we look at a lot of the research wasn't done in our community. And so if the research wasn't done in our community, the results weren't from our community, but they're using these results to diagnose people across the board. So they're using it to diagnose the Asian community. They're using it to diagnose the Black community. They're using it to diagnose the Hispanic community. Now, some of the criteria does go across cultures, but we also know that some of those things we think differently. We look at things differently. We compute things differently. And so that's one thing I also wanted us to touch on in the book. She talks about, depression can look differently. And that was one thing that I noticed, even with myself. Like I said, being a counselor, having been a therapist before, being a social worker, there's times in my life that I felt that I was depressed. But if I went to the DSM-4 and pulled it out and looked at, okay, how many of these check marks do I have? I might not have all of them, But then I think about, one of the things that she really touched on in the book, and it resonated so much with me because I know it's what I do. And what she talked about is, sometimes depression in our community, because we don't have the luxury of not going to work. It might be a single person, it might be a single parent. We don't have the luxury of laying in bed all day. We don't have the luxury of not being involved in activities that we normally would have done if we have to take our children somewhere. But she talked about it could look like overworking or staying busy, so that way you don't have to deal with what's going on inside of your head or inside of you. And that resonated so much with me because personally, I know I've dealt with depression. And it's like, but I stay busy. I've had 2 full-time jobs at times. At my school, I coach football, I coach basketball, I coach track, I leave the house at 6 in the morning and I might not get back till 9 at night. But it's also like, okay, when I get back at 9 at night, all I'm doing is eating, showering, and going to bed. So I'm not sitting here thinking about the things that I really need to process. And so I think that was something that we have to, touch on too, especially in our community. We have to make sure that we go to therapists and go to doctors who are culturally competent. Sometimes I went to Charlemagne the God's Mental Health Summit in New York last year. And one of the things that one of the speakers talked about is like sometimes we want to go and have a counselor or see a therapist that looks like us. And I think that's very valuable because they understand our community, or they should. But one thing that they touched on too was like, not only that's very important, but it's also more important that they're a good therapist. And so I think the thing that we have to know is not only do they can be a good therapist and not look like us, they can be culturally competent, but they need to know, that race is going to come into, the discussions that you have, because it impacts us every day, and we need to know too, just like you said, if it's not someone that you feel connected with, if we don't like a doctor, we go find a new one. If we don't like this mechanic, we go find a new one, right? And so we have to do the same thing with our mental health. If we tried one therapist and they're not working out, or one counselor and they just don't seem to connect, we don't stop. We go find another one. We find one who we do connect with. And if it takes 5-6 times to do it, then that's what we need to do, because we would do it if we had a cancer diagnosis. We would do it if we had, anything medical. We're not just going to say, okay, I'm not going to go see the doctor. It's like, no, we would do it. And the thing is, our mental health impacts us so much. Our mental health impacts our physical health. Our mental health impacts our relationships. And so we have to take those same steps, when we are trying to, take care of our mental health.
Yeah, and I'd like to go back to, like you said, how your depression manifests. With me, it was kind of avoidance. Avoidance going out to spend time with friends. Avoiding gatherings. And also, through my experience with anxiety, I even made a decision not to go to a major university because my anxiety was so bad socially that just the idea of going into a university campus and sitting in a classroom with 300 people, just made my heart race. And then also it comes out in mood shifts with anger. We talked about these boys who are fighting, and also girls these days, they're always fighting, they're always in conflict, because that depression and those feelings that they're feeling are coming out as anger. And so we have to look at that. When we see children who are picking fights, who are angry all the time, who are yelling and screaming, we want to just look at the behavior, but we have to determine where that behavior is coming from. Because when you don't know why you're feeling what you're feeling, then you should start to act out. And so we have to look deeper at that. And so being just more aware of, there are people, like I said, that go to work every day because I know I have to get up and go to work because I can't pay my bills. But what's happening at work? Am I part of committees, or in a sense, am I joining every committee because I don't want to have time to think? I don't want to have time to be in my head. So it can manifest in many different ways. And so I think we need to start looking closer at the behavior of people to see exactly what's happening, the behavior of ourselves to see what's truly happening.
Yeah, and I think that's an excellent point, and it kind of segues into the next thing. I think the majority of the time, one of the things she talks about is the psychological fortitude. And one of the things that I always notice, you can walk down the hallway, you can greet a friend, you can greet a family member, and it's like, hey, what's up? How you doing? And the answer is going to be fine or okay. Like it's a greeting. Like we're not really asking, how are you doing? Right? Because we don't really want the answer.
Right.
we don't have time to diagnose the answer. And I think one of the things that I loved about her book when she talked about this, yeah, definitely. It's like everything, it's always going to be fine or okay, or I'm well, and it's like, people even, are you even saying that, are you supposed to say I'm good, or are you supposed to say I'm well? Like they even, diagnose how you even answer it or what vocabulary you use, but they're not really going to answer. And so what she talks about with the psychological fortitude is really giving a number, and she's saying the psychological fortitude is kind of like our resiliency meter, right? And so even when you're asking something, I started doing this with my groups, because she's saying like, if you're at a 10, then your resiliency is high. You're able to deal with the things that your life, that you're facing in life. You have a good support network. You have good self-worth. You have good self-esteem, all of these things. But the lower that psychological fortitude is, the less, the less support you have, or the less likely you're able to deal, with the things that are happening to you. And so even within my groups, or when I talk, she said you want to put it on a scale. So every day when I do my groups, I ask the kids, okay, on a 1 to 10, how are you? Because if you say a 6, then it's like, okay, we need to have a check-in. Like, what's going on? If you say a 4, we probably need to end this group now and deal with what's going on, versus just saying, if I just went around the circle or around the table and said, how are you doing? They're going to say, I'm good, I'm all right. It's not really giving us something. And what she talked about is, the higher our psychological fortitude is, the better we are able to deal with the things that life throws our way. And just talked about how do we build that psychological fortitude. So I want to try to touch on that a little bit, especially in the Black community. What she talked about in that psychological fortitude is just, how do we build our Blackness, right? How do we build our foundation? And she was like, if our foundation starts, or if our history starts from slavery in this country, then we are starting our psychological fortitude already on a negative thing. And so what she talked about a lot is even finding our value and finding our connection, to our African roots, because our history is in Africa. And I think that's one thing that I noticed in my life. I'm Nigerian. My dad is Nigerian. My mom is Dutch. But even I remember going to school and people used to ask me, how come, Africans don't like African Americans? Or even growing up, African Americans would say stuff about African booty scratch, all of these things. And honestly, it wasn't until the Black Panther came out that I even saw a lot of pride in the African American community in Africa. And I think when we look at that, it brought so much pride. And that's the one thing we have to start to build our pride. When you're a part of a community and you have a foundation, you build a lot of pride, and that brings you a lot of self-esteem when you're a part of that community. And so that's one thing she talked about, is one way to build our psychological fortitude is to start to giving our kids this foundation of, and our family, this foundation of, we have a history, we have a rich history, and we have to start to celebrate that history. All of a sudden after Black Panther, churches started having an African Guard Day, or people walking, Wakanda Forever. And it's like, those same, even though it's a movie, we still have to have that connection. And I think one of the things that I've noticed too is that, even with the different DNA things where you can send in your swab, and now I've noticed people, and I've had people in my circle, my friends, even people back home, like, oh, I'm part Nigerian, so now they have a different connection, to Africa. So, I think that's one thing that she talked about that really touched me as well, starting to build up this psychological fortitude, within our community.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I definitely agree, because within our community, like you said, there's that obvious division between African American, actually coming from Africa, and then, the Black Americans. I think because there is a division where I've heard that sometimes African people don't believe that Black people are hard workers. They think that we're lazy. And so you hear those comments, and then it just kind of grows. But if you do the research for yourself, and you start to introduce yourself to people within the Nigerian or other, cultures, then you have that firsthand experience, and you're not just going off of what was said. But I also think a huge problem is just the segregation within our community and as general. We find so many things that divide us, skin color, light complected versus darker complected, the good hair versus bad hair situation. I have so many people who make those comments, about nappy hair and things of that nature, and not understanding how that tears us down as a community, because you're exuding a negative connotation out of what grows from my head, and
Right.
so there are women and men who won't even wear their natural hair because they're considered less than, or they don't want to be viewed in a professional setting as not being as professional. And we have to consider, why do we even have to experience those things? This is how my hair grows. So why should I have to adjust it, or or do something different to it just to be presentable. And so when that is happening, we need to have a look inwardly and within our community and say, how do we start to lift each other up and not find ways to divide each other further? And so I definitely do believe that when you feel connected to the group, there is a better chance that you're going to maneuver through your own obstacles more successfully.
Yeah, and that's definitely, she also talks about that in the book a lot of times. Even just she talks on about assimilation too, and
Mhm.
just seeing, I know a lot of families, a lot of parents, especially around education or the type of environment that they want their families to grow up in, especially once you start to have children. And one of the things that she also touches on in the book is, that we have to be mindful and be very careful that when we're moving, say we want to move into Sugarland, or say we want to move, into an environment that we know, okay, 9 times out of 10, our kids are going to be safer. 9 times out of 10, the education is going to be better. And we want that for our children, right? We want that for their future. We want that for their foundation. But we also have to be careful that when they're doing that, that we're not losing contact with our culture, that we're not losing contact with our community, because she touches on that. And then that also segues into even just being in the community, being, Black in the community. And we look at a lot of the microaggressions. We look at what happens when we start to assimilate into these schools or into these neighborhoods. And I know the examples I used, and one of the dangers that he talks about is too, our Blackness is at the forefront of everything that we do every day, because it had to be, right? We've been
Right.
questioned about it. We question ourselves about it. I remember last year I used the example. It was actually the very day before I did the presentation, and I was at one of my schools, and the teacher asked me, can I help you? Where are you going? Because my badge, my ID was in my, like, hanging out of my pocket instead of around my neck. And I'm thinking, I've worked at this school for 7 years, and it's like I was talking to a student while I'm walking, and I had to question myself. And that's the thing when she really touches on like the different microaggressions. It's like, I had to question myself about 3, 4, 5 more times that day. Like, did she stop me just because I'm a Black male, walking in this school? Like, if I was a white male or anything other than what I am, would she have stopped me and asked me? And it's like, that was one of the things too that she talks about, is just that because of who we are, we have to, we have to defend ourselves daily. Racism and our race and our culture comes into question every day. And so the thing is that we have to stay connected to our community, especially when we're going into these environments where we are going into, the white American culture. And so she really talked on how do we stay connected. And some of the things that she touched on in the book is, being a part of organizations. A lot of these schools now, might have a Black student union. You might be a part of the NAACP. You might go and I know, like here in Houston, we had a lot of issues, or we had not a lot of issues, but we had a lot of commentary and a lot of different opportunity because of George Floyd, being here and just getting involved. Um, and how do we get involved in the community? How do we get involved in these different things that we can stay committed? And also, a lot of times when we have different hurts or we have different traumas, one of the things that we have to stay active so that way it doesn't affect us in a negative way. And so she touches on a lot of those things in the book as well. And I think that's why when I read this book, it touched on so many different things that was going on in our community, that was going on, within me personally. And that's why I really value this book. And like I said earlier, I believe that this book should be in everyone's household, especially in the Black community, and that the discussion, should be something that you have, continually.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think not only just the Black community, but the communities at large, because I think that will also help them understand our experiences. I worked in an environment that I was one of the few Blacks or African Americans in that environment. And there were things that were always happening that made me question, did this happen because of my race? And then being around predominantly other, whites or Caucasian people, they had a different perspective, and so they didn't understand why I was viewing it the way that I was viewing it. And I remember there was an incident where one person essentially called me angry, And I'm like, if you know me, you know I'm far from angry. And just because I was offended by something that had happened against, in essence, it was a situation where I was advocating for more African American staffs because we had such a diverse population of students. We're wanting people that look like our students to be their teachers. And so it was a comment made, like I said, that I was angry. And that really took me aback, because would that have been said if I wasn't Black? If I wasn't African
Right.
American, would that term have been used to describe me? And so it really made me question my environment. And also, like to my original point, having someone else that looks like me who I can go to and have this discussion, so I can determine, is this really, am I tripping? Is this something, am I overreacting, or was that truly an example of a microaggression? Because it does leave you wondering, is this truly me? Or did I just perceive it differently? And so I think that is important to have, a circle around you of people who have share your experiences, who look like you, to help you, kind of just maneuver through all of these things.
Yeah. And that's the thing too. He touches on it a lot. Like, especially if you're in the environment, whether it's you, even if we have parents on here, or even with your students, or if you have kids, like, those are questions that you need to ask, because a lot of times they might say, oh, they're doing okay, but if they're feeling these microaggressions and they're a teenager, or they're having a fear of rejection, or, subtle, and, like they always say, subtle racism versus overt race. Like, I'd rather know exactly how you feel than I got to sit here and question, what it is. And I think those are, like I said, a lot of times nowadays, when I grew up, we had dinner together every night. It's like we're going around the table sharing how our day is going, and sometimes just we live in a fast-paced society now. We're on the go all the time. I think especially if we're looking at our psychological fortitude, if we're looking at the mental health, not only of ourselves, but also of our children, in our community, that these are questions that we have to start to have. These are discussions that we start to have. Have to have daily, weekly, monthly, and like it has to be ongoing. And I think, that's one of the things that Dr. Walker talks about in our book, is that we have these things are happening to us. These things are happening to our kids. We know that our kids are dealing with these things on a daily basis. And if we're looking at us as adults, 9 times out of 10, we think that our psychological fortitude is going to be higher, than a teenager, or higher than an elementary student. And so if we have a higher, psychological fortitude, and we're having struggles, and we're having issues, trouble dealing with every day to day, how much so more with our teenagers? How much more so with our elementary students who don't have the vocabulary, don't have, the same support network? And so this discussion is something that we definitely have to have at the forefront of our mind, especially if we want to start to heal, generational traumas. If we want to start to heal, we want to start, this is chain breakers. If we want to start to break the chain around mental health, then we have to start being honest and really having these, candid discussions. And even just the title of her book, The Unapologetic Guy, it's like, we're not apologizing for having this discussion. We're not apologizing for having these feelings, because it's valued, it's truthful, and it's what we deal with on a daily basis. So we have to be able to have these discussions within our community. And so I hope that this platform and what, definitely helps to keep the discussion going.
Yeah, I totally agree. And also, there's so many things in the book. She touches on so many wonderful points, but I do want to touch briefly on uh, her discussion about the religious and spiritual beliefs, how it could be kind of like a blessing and a curse, so to speak. So I know my perspective from that, my personal experience is growing up in a religious family. My grandfather is a pastor, and just having these set expectations, that God has these, rules for you. And so you have to live within this standard. For me, it just brought on so much pressure for me to do the right thing. And it probably resulted in me staying in a bad marriage longer than I should have, because it was the right thing to do, and even with, having Cameron at an early age, even rushing into marriage because it was the right thing to do. And so also
Right.
not getting help because, I'm just going to pray it away, and I'm going to continue to exhibit this behavior, and I'm going to have more faith, and I'm going to pray harder. I'm going to, work harder. it kind of prevented me from getting the help that I needed sooner. And so I wanted you to kind of speak on that a little bit too.
Yeah, I have some, or not exactly the same situation, but I think even growing up, I think the older generation, a lot of times, if you're brought up in the church, it's like it's certain discussions you didn't have. Like I remember my parents never really had a discussion with me about premarital sex. Like you were raised in the church, you know what the Bible says about it, so why do we have to have a discussion about it? Then when I came home at 17 and I had a girl pregnant, I had a baby on the way. It's like this is our first discussion. It's a little bit too little, too late. And I think that's one of the things too. Is like, you know, even in the Bible, it talks about faith without works is dead, right? So we can't just say we're going to pray it away. If we could pray it away, we wouldn't have any issue. There would be nothing we would be doing because everything would be prayed away, right? We would
Right.
pray away cancer. We would pray away abuse. We would pray away drug. All of these things would already be taken care of, and it's like faith without works is dead. And I think, just like we had cancer, we would still go see an oncologist, right? And it's the same way, just mental health, it looks different. We haven't really had the history or the foundation of it that we value it the same as our physical health. Even just from Chain Breakers, when we posted 2 weeks ago, I actually had a lady from my church give me a call, reached out to me, and her son is dealing with bipolar and he's refusing to take his medicine. 2 weeks ago, her father, who I'm guessing is, over 60 years old, is trying to beat him into behaving, and it was so bad that the son had two knives in his hand and the grandfather had a gun. Right.
Wow.
And it's like if we could just pray things away, or if we could just beat things away or discipline things away, half of the issues that we have wouldn't be happening. And so I think, that's one of the things she talks about. Yes, you definitely have faith. Yes, you definitely pray about it. Yes, you definitely bring all your troubles and all your worries to God and, all of those things if that's your belief. But it's also some action that has to take place. God also gave us doctors. God also gave us, medicine. God also gave us therapists. God also gave us counseling. God also gave us medicine for ADHD and bipolar and whatever else that we're dealing with. Like if we're going to say that the church and the faith and what we believe, that everything is from God, he's also given us these other tools, and we need to take advantage of those other tools, because we can't just say, yes, I have faith in God, and I'm not going to go take any other steps, because that's definitely not what I believe. I don't believe that's what God is telling us to do. But I think a lot of times, especially, in the older generation, sometimes that gets judged too. Oh, your faith just isn't strong enough. I don't know how much stronger my faith has to get, but it also has to be some action behind it. We can't just read one part of the Bible, especially if the other part says faith without work now. We have to do the work, in counseling and therapy and healing. We talked about, one of the videos earlier was about peeling back these layers. That's work. That's the work part of this faith walk, right? That's the work part. We have to peel these layers back. We have to there's a lot of abuse that happens in the church, right? And that's taboo to even talk about. There's a lot of abuse that happens. You can read an article every week about sexual things happening in the church, about abuse happening in the church, sex trafficking happening in the church. So it's like we also have to be very careful, how the church is just you know, a place, a building, but even just with our faith, like we still have to do the work. We still have to have these kind of discussions, because I think a lot of times if we just put our faith in the church and we don't do anything else, then that's where we also get blindsided with these other things that are happening. Because again, it goes to also that first thing I said, what happens in this house stays in this house, and that happens in the church house as well. And I think, that was one of I like that point as well too, because it's like, I am a youth minister. I do believe all of these things. I also know that we have to do the work, and this is the part of the work that we have to do.
Right, right. And the part of the discernment is knowing, that also that men are human. The pastors are human, they're men, and they have their own beliefs. And so we have to be careful, one, who we're following, and two, that they're preaching for all around health. Because like you said, mental health is just like physical health. If a pastor is telling you not to treat your polarism, whether he tell you not to treat your cancer. So you have to be careful when you are leading, when you're following someone and what their belief systems are, and that they're really truly it's coming from God and not just on their own personal beliefs.
Yeah. And I know, I'm not sure how long we're going on, but I also, like the first part of the book mostly, spoke upon depression, spoke upon, uh, some of the things, some of the common, assumptions. And the second part of the book, which he talked on, is, okay, this is the background, or this is where, how do we help ourselves? How do we start to take, action, that's needed? How do we start to deal, with some of these things? And so I definitely wanted us to touch on, how do we go about finding a counselor? How do we, a lot of times, even working in the school, and it's like, it's so many acronyms, it's so many letters. It's like, you can go see a counselor or a therapist, and they could be a LPC, they could be, which is a licensed practical counselor, right? They could be a LMSW, which is a licensed master social worker. They could be a psychologist, or if you need medicine, then you would have to go see a psychiatrist. So even just navigating the system, she talked about, how hard it is to, even for parents and even for ourselves, to even understand. And where do we go to find, where do we go to find the help? And so I just want to make sure, people who are listening, or if you guys might even have people that have come to you. I've had other coworkers come to me and say, I want to find a Christian counselor because I want the counseling part, but I also want the Christian part, you know. And so I think if you're on here, if especially if you're working full time, a lot of times jobs now have employee assistance programs. So one thing I want to talk about is making sure you know what your insurance covers, right? Making sure that if you do find a therapist that you like, making sure that they take the insurance that you have. So employee assistance programs, I know at least, with my position, my job, you get 6 free counseling sessions or therapy sessions, and it's per year, but it's per problem. So it's like, me personally, and I'm going to be a little transparent. It's like, okay, my first 6 sessions, it might be around, I'm using depression. These are my first 6 sessions. I'm not trying to come out of pocket. I'm not trying to pay this $120 a session. I know it's a lot, but listen, we went to school for 6 to 8 years to get these degrees, and so they're gonna be charging, right? But I did 6 sessions under depression. Okay, guess what? When that 6th session is up, the next 6 sessions is gonna be around maybe relationship issues. The next 6 sessions is gonna be around around something else. So we definitely want to know what our insurance covers. We definitely want to know also what kind of therapist are you going? Do you want to see a licensed counselor? Do you want to see a licensed social worker? At the end of the day, does it really matter? I mean, all of us have been trained in in the same thing. It was just the route that we chose, and it might just be the route that we chose based on the type of career we wanted to have or the environment that we wanted to work in. But I definitely think it's very valuable to make sure, know your insurance, and also to make sure that whoever you are seeing, that it is somebody that you can be connected to. Because it's also, therapy doesn't work if you're not comfortable. Therapy doesn't work, counseling doesn't work if you're not going in there and being honest, right? If you're not going in there and being vulnerable, if you're not going in there transparent, you're just going to be spinning your wheels, and you're going to wake up 2 years from now and you're in the same place or even further than what you were, where you were at that time. And so I think it's important for us to know, it's important for us to ask those questions. Some people, some counselors, some therapists, they might have a sliding fee scale. If you can't afford I saw someone put $120 in the chat. It's hard for me to read it since I'm on my phone, but it's like, okay, they might have a sliding fee, or they might do even something. It's people I know that it might be the parents receiving counseling along with the kid. This person or this counselor, this therapist, they might be seeing 4 or 5 of your family. They should be able to work something out. See what your insurance covers, see if there's something, see if they have any type of assistance programs themselves, or see if they'll do a sliding fee scale. I would also, if I know, at least in the school district that we work in right now, we have different grants out there and different things that are available in the school system, especially, for students, So even if you have a student that is in need of counseling or is in need of therapy, there's also some programs in different school districts uh, that has support, for that. And so we have to talk. We have to be vulnerable. We have to talk about what's going on with our families. You don't have to tell everything, but you have to talk enough to get the information that you need to move forward. So like I said, know about your employee assistance, know what your insurance covers or what they do. And also look, if you have children in the school system, ask questions, talk to the counselors, talk to, the professionals that are in those buildings and see if they have any other resources that are available for us to get, the support that we need.
Right. And when you do locate a therapist, don't be afraid to ask for consultation. Some of them will do like a 15 minutes with you to kind of talk to you about their background, their training, because there are, if you're dealing with something like extreme extensive trauma, you want someone who is trained in trauma, and so they should be willing to have those discussions with you about what your needs are to see if you're a fit. So before you even commit to starting with that therapist, just ask for a conversation so you can talk about your concerns and see if they are the right ones to support you with those concerns. And then again, like I said, even if you do decide to go to someone and you've gotten established with them, but it's not working, then to continue to shop around, because you want to make sure that person is a good fit. But you also have to be open. When I started therapy this time, I was convinced. I was like, I want a African American woman. I want someone who can really relate to me and my struggles. And God knew better than I did. He gave me a white man, and he has been the best therapist I've ever had, because he is culturally competent. He really has done the trauma work, and he is providing the services that I need. So it's been the best experience. I've been in therapy now with him for about a year and a half, and I've never consistently gone to therapy for that long. So, it's kind of like buying a car. You go in and you think you know exactly what you want, but through asking questions and just being open, you may find out what you actually need. So, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to talk to your friends, your coworkers, and see if they have therapists that they're working with, or if they have family members who are therapists, and then maybe you can speak with them and get some referrals. But it's important. Just like most people are going to go to MD Anderson for cancer treatment, you need to make sure that you're working with a trained professional who knows their things when you're working with your mental health. It's equally as important.
Yeah. And I think, just like we said earlier, a lot of times too is just having those discussions. I guarantee you, it's probably people in your circle that are going to counseling or going to therapy. A lot of times, even with doctors, you see it on Facebook all the time. I need a referral for this. I need a referral for that. It's very seldom that I've seen I need a referral for a therapist or I need a referral for counseling. But the truth is, some of your family, some of your friends, some of your coworkers, they might already be going to therapists or counselors, and you can get a referral from them. I mean, that's how most businesses work. It's like it's a personal referral. It's a person you trust. It's a person that's in your circle too. But again, if we're keeping everything in and we're not having discussions, you don't have to tell them everything that's going on. But personal referrals are usually the best, because that person has worked with that counselor, that therapist, and it's someone that you trust that's in your circle, or at least it gives you an idea of where to start looking. So I think we definitely have to start, having those discussions. That's the only way that we're going to be able to start to heal.
Most definitely. And we want you to use Chain Breakers as a resource as well. If you have questions, send us a message through Messenger, leave us comments. We're here to help. We're here to support in any way that we can. So please utilize that as a resource whenever needed.
Definitely. And I know it's been an hour. We said we were going to be on for an hour, maybe a little bit longer. And so we definitely just want to thank you. I think Facebook Live, I think you can always go back and watch it. So if there's somebody else in your circle that you think would benefit from the discussion today, definitely tag them or let them know. We're looking at having Facebook Live. I think we're going to do it every 2 weeks at 7 o'clock on Sundays. And like I said, we'll be doing different videos. We'll be posting different information. I think the next upcoming one will will be more so around some women issues and some men issues, and we're going to continue to have the dialogue. And again, if you have questions, if you have comments, if you have a topic that you want us to discuss, definitely reach out to us. We've already had some, DM. Like I said, I had, people, someone from my church reach out to me. I had someone from back home in Michigan, reach out to me. And we want to spread the word. We want to try to start to heal. We want to try to start to break these chains, that have bound us in mental health, different traumas and all of these things. And so that's what our goal is here. It's something that we collaborated with. It's something like I definitely believe it's part of our purpose and part of the reason that me and Antoinette were even teamed up together. This started out as a work project, and I guarantee and I promise I know it's going to turn into something, major, something real big that really start to heal and start to change lives, especially when we're working, and dealing with the mental health that is, rampant right now, especially like I said, with the rise of COVID, with all of those things. We know we have to have these discussions, and we're up for the challenge.
Most definitely. Like Emma said, we're going to dig deep into some relationship issues. We got to figure out how we can make these relationships work. And so if you have something that's on your mind and you want to share, please let us know, because we want to meet the needs of our audience. So if you have some ideas or you have some thoughts, please share it so we can make sure that we're addressing everyone's needs.
And I'm going to encourage you again, go out and get the book, The Unapologetic Guide to Black Mental Health. Like I said, it has definitely been a life changer for me, not only personally, but also professionally. And like I said, it's a book that needs to be in every household, it needs to be read, it needs to be discussed, even deeper than what we could go into today, because it's so much in the book, and it's so much that we just touched the surface on. And I know, like I said, it's life changing. So I just definitely encourage you, buy the book for a friend, buy the book for a family member. I don't know how much it is because my book was gifted to me. I think Antoinette said hers was as well. So maybe that's what I need to do. I need to gift the book to somebody too. So maybe that'll be my goal for this week.
Yeah, I think we need to pay it forward. But yeah, definitely, there's so much that we didn't even scratch the surface on, but we will in later videos and later lives discuss all of the things, because she covers so much. So yeah, do yourself a favor and get the book. And like Emma said, we're going to pay it forward. We're going to find someone to bless with the book this week.
Definitely. All right. Well, thank you,
All right.
everybody.
Thank you for your support.
Okay.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.